Okay.
Okay, the topic today is working with special needs children that have autism. They're a very select group. Amazingly enough, it seems like almost 1 in 150 children born today has some degree of autism. Now, are they born with this or is it developing? That's yet for science to pick up. A lot of the modern medical practices that we're looking at are the injections with mercury and some of the toxicity that the children run into or that the mothers may have ahead of time. But one thing that all the autistic children seem to have is hypersensitivity at the frontal lobe of their brain. Consequently, a lot of touching to the face or head is very uncomfortable for them. However, what we also have is a swelling of the frontal lobe with that hypersensitivity. And the only way to address that is through cranial work. Now, this is very interesting because we're dealing with children who aren't used to being touched or don't like to be touched on the forehead, and we're also dealing with pressure against the frontal lobe that we have to decompress. We're also dealing with a cranium that's not fully developed. So it's creating incredible challenges. However, there's incredible rewards. One of the main things we've noticed in working with the children with autism is that initially they're very hypersensitive to the touch, like I said. So a cranial decompression that will decompress the cranium, taking the frozenness or stuckness out of the cranium so it's no longer compressing down on that frontal lobe, and also a decompression that allows the cerebral spinal fluid to be pumped out of that frontal lobe area via the venous sinuses. This is quite interesting because when that happens, what we're seeing with the children that have autism is that there's an incredible ability to refocus. Where before they had attention problems, being able to focus, being able to learn, being able to make eye contact, we're seeing all these things improve. We're also seeing some major improvements in sleep patterns. Just the other day I had a mother whose son was born 7 years ago, and in 7 years had not slept past 2 o'clock in the morning. After the second decompression of the cranium, the child actually slept all the way through the night. When the mother came in, the mother was in tears because she'd really kind of given up on the concept of sleep and being rested, and she almost didn't know what to do with herself because she was so much more rested. Now, with the autistic decompression of the cranium, decompressing an autistic child's cranium, the challenge of touch has to be very gentle yet very persistent to be able to get the cranium to work against the pressures being exerted on the cranium to allow the decompression. And this takes a challenge. It takes the child lying still, so there has to be a trust factor. It takes the child being willing to let it happen. It takes a child beginning to trust me. And this only develops through a couple sessions. And the wonderful thing about cranial work is as the cranium decompresses, the hypersensitivity diminishes, so that children that initially even the lightest of touch would bring a lot of reaction to after having had several decompressions now actually ask for the decompression, actually ask for the treatment. And they're feeling better. Overall, they're feeling better. They're more energized. Now, there's another part that we add to this, and that's the core distortion release. And the core distortion release on children allows an unwinding of their whole core and a structural rebalancing. Basically, what this is doing for the autistic children is it's allowing them to maximize their potentials. Sometimes they've been very frustrated with their potentials or have some limited potentials. But when we can maximize what they do have via the cranial work, we've opened up doors that were never open for them before. Balance, walking, movement patterns, all that gets balanced. Also structure. We see an improvement in the way they stand and the way they move. We see better mobility and better strength and better coordination. All of these things really help the autistic child start to recover and start to rehabilitate what they've lost from the condition of autism. And working with the children also opens the door for the parents to become aware of what the detoxing needs to be that takes place for them. There's a reason for the swelling in the frontal lobe. Many of the children that have gone through electrodermal screening or other forms of analysis about the toxins, we're finding mercuries, heavy metals, bacterias, sometimes even reactions to the egg yolk that the vaccines are made from, and hypersensitivities via allergies or just sensitivities to these materials. The body detoxes better after the cranial work. So doing this in conjunction with the detox adds even more recovery and more hope for the autistic child. So this is kind of an opening field. I've yet to work with a child that didn't show some improvement. Different children show greater or lesser degrees of improvement. I don't always expect a child to be able to sleep through the night after 1 or 2 treatments. I don't always expect a child to be that much more coordinated, but there is a significant improvement. But some children have to go ahead and develop some of the motor pathways that weren't developed earlier because of their limitations. But we improve them to a point that they can start to rehabilitate. We get a basis for the rehabilitation by doing the cranial work with the autistic children. I think that's the most important issue. We give them an improved place to start from. We detox and we allow a decompression of the cranium so the hypersensitivity is not there, it's not swollen in the frontal lobe, and they're more coordinated and they can start to catch up. Whereas as long as they have these limitations, they're always going to be fighting it and they're always going to be one leg down, one step behind, because they don't have some of these basic things working for them.
Could I ask one quick question
Okay.
about how long it took you to I know that the structural work has taken 30 years or more, and how long have you been working with the children and seeing these results?
Well, working with the autistic children has been a fairly recent development. I didn't have a lot of autistic children identified in this area for a long time, but I'd say within the last year I've started working with the autistic children, and I wasn't really looking for that. They just started, the mothers started bringing them to me because they were looking for anything that could help. And I didn't promise anything. I said we could try and see what would happen, and the mothers, they got around. There's an autistic support group, and when one mother noticed improvement, she talked to the others, and next thing I know, I've got a long stream of autistic children being scheduled for sessions.
Excellent. Thank you, John.
You're welcome.